You are looking at a fortress, a $60 million monument to excess. To the world, this house was a palace, a modern-day Versailles, built on Bad Boy Records and Ciroc vodka. But on this morning, the Department of Homeland Security didn't knock. They breached. When the feds walked out, they weren't just carrying boxes of evidence. They were carrying the shattered fragments of an American myth. They were carrying the receipts for a 30-year party that everyone wanted to attend, until the lights turned on. Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Brother Love, a man with more names than a fugitive. He was the sun that the entire hip-hop universe orbited around. He didn't just conquer the industry. He grabbed it by the throat and choked the money out of it. But there is a rule in physics, and there is a rule in hell. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. We spent decades looking at the light. We looked at the white suits, the white parties, the white smiles. We forgot to look at what was hiding in the shadow. It creates a psychological effect known as the halo effect. By draping himself and his guests in the color of purity, Combs wasn't just throwing a barbecue. He was curating a perception. He was sanitizing his own history. It's a masterclass in manipulation. If everything looks this clean, how could the man running it be dirty? But that's the paradox of Sean Combs. He is the ultimate duality. He is the man who opened doors for black ownership in corporate America, and the man who allegedly locked doors to keep his victims inside. He is the genius who discovered the Notorious B.I.G, and the chaotic element that some claim led to his demise. We are not here to read you the headlines. You have Twitter for that. We are here to perform an autopsy on a living soul. We are here to answer the question that haunts every empire built on blood. What is the price of being a king? Psychology tells us about the Dark Triad, 3 personality traits that, when combined, create the most dangerous and often the most successful people on earth. Narcissism, the grandiosity, the need to be worshipped. Machiavellianism, the cold, calculated manipulation of others for personal gain. Psychopathy, the lack of empathy, the ability to destroy without a pulse of regret. Most people have trace amounts of these traits, but Sean Combs, he didn't just have them, he weaponized them. He turned a personality disorder into a business model, and for a long time, it worked. Welcome to the dissection. I'm your narrator, and today, we are walking into the dark. We are going to deconstruct the rise of a mogul and the fall of a monster. We will look at the psychology of control, the addiction to power, and the terrifying reality of what happens when a man starts to believe his own PR. But to understand the monster he became in the mansions of Los Angeles, we have to go back to where the hunger started. We have to go back to a time before the diamonds, before the Diddy. We have to go back to the day he learned that the only way to survive a violent world was to become the most violent thing in it. To find the devil, you don't look at the horns. You look at the hole in the soul where the empathy used to be. And for Sean Combs, That hole was dug on a cold morning in 1972. Harlem, the era of heroin and hustlers. Sean is 3 years old. His father, Melvin Combs, leaves the house. He is a man known on the streets, an associate of the infamous Frank Lucas, a man who dealt in the kind of products that ruin neighborhoods. But to Sean, he was just daddy. Melvin was found slumped over the steering wheel of his Cadillac on Central Park West, executed. A drug deal gone wrong. But this is where the psyche of P. Diddy begins. Not with the truth, but with a lie. His mother, Janice, didn't tell him his father was a drug dealer. She told him his father was a businessman, a philanthropist, a king who died too young. Do you see the seed being planted? Sean grew up worshiping a ghost. He spent his entire childhood chasing the shadow of a great man who never actually existed. He was chasing a phantom. He learned early, the truth doesn't matter. The story matters. Perception is reality. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep that illusion alive. She dressed him in designer clothes while they lived in public housing. She treated him like a prince in exile. In psychology, we call this the golden child syndrome. When a child is told he is special, that he is destined for greatness, that he is above the rules, he believes it. But the world outside his apartment wasn't a palace. It was a concrete jungle. And Sean realized that being a prince wasn't enough. You had to be a warrior. There is a story he tells about his paper route. Most kids deliver papers to buy candy. Sean delivered papers to conquer territory. He didn't just walk the route. He studied the logistics. He optimized the path. If another kid tried to take his block, let's just say Sean wasn't afraid of conflict. He had a rage inside him, a Napoleonic fire. He was short. He was fatherless. He was hungry. And he realized that in America, respect isn't given. It is taken, usually with cash. Cut to 1,990. He talks his way into an internship at Uptown Records. This is the moment. This is the origin story of the bad boy. Picture this. He is a student at Howard University, ND. See, Uptown Records is in New York City. That is a 4-hour gap. Most people would quit. Sean Combs saw a math problem he could solve with adrenaline. Every Thursday, he finishes class. He runs to the train station. He rides the Amtrak to Penn Station. He walks into the Uptown offices carrying a briefcase that is mostly empty, just to look important. He didn't walk. He sprinted. He washed cars. He fetched coffee. He walked dogs. He was invisible. Until he wasn't. There is a specific moment that defines his Machiavellian brilliance. Heavy D, the rapper, needs a specific producer for a track. The producer is impossible to reach. The executives are giving up. Sean, this 20-year-old intern, steps up. He doesn't ask for permission. He hunts. He tracks the producer down. He begs. He threatens. He charms. He uses every tool in the manipulation handbook. He gets the producer. He gets the credit. He realizes that no is just a suggestion for people who are too weak to negotiate. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He was feeding. He looked at Andre Harrell, the boss of Uptown, and he didn't just want to be him. He wanted to eat him. He wanted to absorb his power. Let's pause the tape. Look at that young man running for the train. We love to use the word passion. We say, oh, he's just passionate about music. That is not passion. That is obsession. And you need to understand the difference, because one builds art and the other builds empires and destroys souls. Passion is about the process. You do it because you love the work. You love the music. You love the creation. Obsession, specifically the kind found in the Dark Triad, is about the outcome. Sean Combs wasn't obsessed with the snare drum or the melody. He was obsessed with winning. He was obsessed with the validation. He was trying to fill that hole the bullet left in 1972. Psychologists call this pathological ambition. It's a survival mechanism. If I am the most powerful man in the room, nobody can leave me. Nobody can hurt me. Passion burns a candle. Obsession burns the whole house down, just to prove you own the matches. To Sean, people weren't collaborators. They were rungs on a ladder, and he was climbing fast. Too fast. By the early 90 seconds, he had transformed. Sean was gone. Puffy was born. He was A&R at Uptown. He was shaping the sound of New York. Jodeci, Mary J, Blige. He was turning street grit into polished gold. But the ego is a balloon. You keep blowing air into it, and eventually, it gets too big for the room. He was fired from Uptown. Most people would be devastated. Puffy. He saw it as a graduation. He realized he couldn't serve a king anymore. He had to build his own castle. He needed a soldier. He needed a voice that was bigger than his own ego. He needed a partner in crime. On a street corner in Brooklyn, he found him. Christopher Wallace, the Notorious B.I.G. The talent meets the monster. Biggie had the flow of a god, but Puffy had the plan of a general. Together, they were about to change the world. But remember what I said about the price of greatness. The bill was coming due, and the currency was going to be blood. The empire is rising, but so are the bodies. The funeral is over. The tears are dry. The Notorious B.I.G, the soul of Bad Boy Records, is gone. Most labels would have collapsed. Most men would have retreated into the shadows to mourn. But Sean Combs, he didn't retreat. He reloaded. He realized something terrifyingly simple. If the star is dead, then I must become the star. This is the moment. The producer stepped out from behind the mixing board. This is the birth of the shiny suit era. To the public, it looked like a celebration. The videos were brighter. The champagne was more expensive. The samples were catchier. But psychologically, it was a distraction. It was a magician waving a diamond-encrusted hand so you wouldn't notice the blood on the floor. Diddy wasn't just in the videos anymore. He was the video. He was dancing in everyone's frame, rapping on everyone's verse. The ego had taken the wheel. And when a narcissist starts to believe he is the source of the light, he starts to view everyone else as just a reflection. And reflections, they don't have rights. They don't have feelings. They are property. This is where the Dark Triad shifts from ambition to tyranny. In the industry, they started whispering. They called Bad Boy a plantation. Look at the contracts. Look at the artists. Ma Dollary, the Locks, Total. They weren't partners. They were batteries. Diddy plugged them in, drained their energy, drained their creativity. And when the charge ran low, he didn't recharge them. He looked for a replacement. He operated on a philosophy of total control. He controlled what they wore. He controlled what they said. He controlled the money. He was the gatekeeper to their dreams, which meant he owned their nightmares. But what happens when someone says no to a god? What happens when a piece of property decides to speak back? Let me take you to April 15th, 1999. This is the moment the mask slipped. This wasn't a rumor. This was a police report. The song is Hate Me Now by Nas, featuring Diddy. They shoot a video. In one scene, Diddy is crucified on a cross. A bold, blasphemous image. At the last minute, Diddy gets cold feet. He's worried about the backlash. He tells his manager, "Cut the scene. Take me off the cross." Steve Stout doesn't ensure it's cut. The video airs on MTV. The cross scene is there. Diddy sees it. Now, a normal person gets angry. A normal person fires his manager. But a tyrant perceives this as an act of war, a challenge to his omnipotence. Diddy doesn't call a lawyer. He calls his bodyguards. He marches into the offices of Interscope Records. In the middle of the day, he finds Steve Stout. And then, chaos. He smashes a champagne bottle over Stout's head. Then, while Stout is bleeding on the floor, Diddy and his men allegedly kick him over and over. They trash the office. They tear phones out of the wall. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution of dominance. It was a message broadcast to the entire industry. Disobey me, and I will not just sue you. I will break you. Why? Why risk $1 billion empire over a music video scene? Because to the Machiavellian mind, it is better to be feared than loved. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote that in 1513. Diddy lived it in 1999. You see, if you rule by love, People can betray you when they stop loving you, but if you rule by fear, the fear never leaves. Diddy understood that fear is a currency more valuable than cash. When he walked into a room, the air changed. The oxygen left. People stopped breathing until he gave them permission. This violence, it wasn't a loss of control. It was the imposition of control. It is a trait called instrumental aggression. He used violence as a tool, like a hammer. And the terrifying part, it worked. Stout survived. Diddy was arrested. But look at the outcome. The charges were reduced. The settlement was paid. And the legend of the untouchable P. Diddy only grew. He learned that he could buy his way out of consequences. He learned that if you are rich enough, the law is just a suggestion. But here is the question you need to ask yourself. We watched the videos. We bought the Kirok. We danced to the hits. We saw the bully. We saw the tyrant. And we applauded. Why? Because we are addicted to the spectacle of power. We forgive the monster as long as he entertains us. But power is a drug, and tolerance is a dangerous thing. When you feed a monster, it grows. And by the turn of the millennium, the monster was starving. The champagne bottle was just the beginning. The violence was about to move from the office to the bedroom and the club. The gun is loaded. The safety is off. And the night is just getting started. For 2 decades, Sean Combs defied gravity. He survived the East Coast-West Coast War. He survived the gun charges. He survived the shifting tides of the music industry. He built an aura of invincibility. He convinced the world and himself that he was too big to fail. But gravity is the one law you cannot bribe. And the higher you build the tower, the more violent the collapse. The cracks didn't start with a bang. They started with a whisper. Rumors, blinds items, quiet settlements kept out of the press. But on November 16th, 2023, the dam broke. Cassie Ventura, the woman who stood by his side for over a decade, the woman he molded, styled, and controlled. She filed a lawsuit, and for the first time, the public didn't just hear rumors. They read the details, the violence, the coercion, the absolute, terrifying darkness behind the closed doors of the billionaire's lifestyle. Diddy did what he always does. He denied. He fought. He settled the lawsuit in 24 hours to make it go away. He thought he could buy silence one last time. But you cannot buy the truth when the world has already seen the receipts. Then came the video. The hallway footage from the Intercontinental Hotel. This is the moment the mogul died, and the monster was revealed to the world. There was no music, no editing, no shiny suits, just a man in a towel, chasing a terrified woman down a hallway, throwing her to the ground, kicking her, dragging her like luggage. It was primal. It was pathetic. In that grainy footage, we didn't see a genius. We saw a bully who had lost control, and the silence that followed that video was deafening. The brands dropped him. The friends disappeared. The key to the city was revoked. The phone, which had rung non-stop for 30 years, suddenly went quiet. This brings us to the most terrifying psychological state a human being can experience, the narcissistic collapse. You have to understand, for a man like Diddy, the public image is not just a mask. It is his skin, without the adoration, without the fear, without the applause. He doesn't exist. When the mask is ripped off, there is no real person underneath to handle the pain. There is only a vacuum. Imagine the atmosphere inside that mansion on Star Island. $60 million of marble and gold, but empty. The parties are over. The entourage has fled to save their own careers. He is walking through empty halls, surrounded by portraits of himself. This is the true cost of the Dark Triad. You treat people like objects your whole life. Eventually, you are left alone with your collection, and objects cannot love you back. This is the paradox of the tyrant. He spent a lifetime demanding loyalty, demanding ride or die. But loyalty bought with fear is not loyalty. It is a hostage situation. And when the hostage taker loses his gun, the hostages don't stay to comfort him. They run. March 25th, 2024. The raids. We return to where we started. But now, look closer at the imagery. It wasn't just Diddy losing his home. We saw his sons, his legacy, handcuffed, marching out with lasers on their backs. The sins of the father were literally visiting the children. He built this empire to leave a legacy. But in his blind pursuit of pleasure and power, he poisoned the very ground his children had to walk on. Let's stop and analyze this deep emptiness. Why do we, as human beings, need failure? Failure is the mechanism that teaches us empathy. It teaches us that we are mortal. It connects us to other people, because to struggle is to be human. But Diddy never allowed himself to fail. He bought his way out of every lesson. He cheated every test. So when the fall finally came, he had no emotional muscles to break the impact. He didn't just fall from a cliff. He fell into a mirror. And for the first time in his life, he was forced to look at the reflection without the filters. He didn't see a king. He didn't see a god. He saw a lonely, aging man who had consumed everything around him until there was nothing left to eat, except himself. The tragedy isn't that he lost his money. The tragedy is that he lost his soul decades ago, and he only just realized it when the checks bounced. The party is over. The lights are on, and the room is empty. Reinvention. It is the oldest survival tactic in America. When the story gets ugly, you don't change the plot. You change the title. Sean Combs knew the walls were closing in. He felt the temperature of the culture shifting. The whispers in the industry were becoming shouts. So, in the final act of his career, he decided to perform one last magic trick. He tried to kill P. Diddy. He tried to kill the bad boy who broke bottles and managed by fear. He told the world his new name was Love. Brother Love. It wasn't just a nickname. It was a calculated psychological pivot. He started preaching about frequency, about high vibrations, about black excellence as a spiritual practice. He did the unthinkable. He gave the publishing rights back to his artists. $E, the Locks, the estate of Biggie, assets worth millions, returned for free to the public. It looked like redemption. It looked like the benevolent king finally sharing the wealth, preparing for his sainthood. But in the world of the Dark Triad, altruism is rarely free. It is usually a down payment on a pardon. He was trying to buy his way into heaven before the devil came to collect the debt. And for a brief moment, it worked. Let's look at the last shot. The final, blinding moment of glory before the darkness took over. September 12th, 2023. The MTV Video Music Awards. Diddy is there to accept the Global Icon Award. This is the highest honor. The victory lap. Imagine the scene. He steps onto the stage, and for 15 minutes, time stops. He runs through the hits. I'll be missing you. Bad boy for life. Mo money, mo problems. He is 53 years old, but he moves with the hunger of a 20-year-old. The crowd is screaming. Generations of fans are singing along. His children are on stage with him, smiling, looking at their father like he is a superhero. It was magnificent. It was flawless. It was his last dance. But unlike Michael Jordan hanging in the air for that final shot in Utah, capturing perfection, Diddy was hanging by a thread. There is a profound, haunting sadness in that footage. If you watch it today, this wasn't a celebration. It was a funeral for his own ego, disguised as a party. He was screaming love into the microphone, while the prosecutors were quietly stapling indictments together in a dark room just a few miles away. He was standing on top of the mountain, beating his chest, desperate to prove he still mattered. But the mountain was actually a volcano, and it was already erupting beneath his feet. Less than 2 months later, the lawsuit dropped. Then the raids. Then the handcuffs. The global icon era lasted less than a fiscal quarter. The resurrection failed. The magic trick didn't fool the audience this time. Now, the music has stopped, and we are left to sift through the ashes to answer the final question. What is the legacy of Sean Combs? Legacy is a heavy word. Usually, we talk about legacy in terms of creation. We cannot erase what he built. You cannot tell the history of modern music without the chapter on Bad Boy Records. He changed the sound of the 90 seconds. He invented the remix. He made hip-hop safe for the suburbs and profitable for the streets. He taught a generation of black entrepreneurs that they could be owners, not just employees, that they could own the vodka, the clothing line, and the network. He showed us that a kid from Harlem could drink tea with the royal family and sell records to the world. That is the greatness. That is the inspiration. But history is a judge that cannot be bribed. And history will not just remember the shiny suits and the chart-topping hits. It will remember the silence of the victims. His legacy is a paradox. It is a golden statue standing in a pool of mud. He leaves behind a blueprint for success, but it is a blueprint written in toxic ink. He taught us how to get to the top, but he also taught us exactly who we should not become when we get there. He became the ultimate example of the Icarus myth. He flew too close to the sun, not because he wanted to see the light, but because he thought he was the sun. This brings us to the final value, the lesson of immortality. The Dark Triad personality is obsessed with living forever. They want to be statues. They want to be myths. In a twisted way, Diddy achieved it. He will be remembered forever. But there is a difference between being a legend and being a warning. True immortality isn't about having your name on a building or a check. It is about the emotional footprint you leave on the souls of the people around you. It is about the people you lifted up, not the people you stepped on to get a better view. Diddy spent 30 years building a monument to himself. But in the end, a monument without a foundation is just a ruin waiting to happen. He wanted to be the king of New York, and in the end, he got his wish. But he forgot that most kings in history don't die in their beds. They die alone, holding on to a crown that no longer fits. The music is over. The legacy is sealed, and the silence is the loudest sound of all. We have reached the end of the tape. We have dissected the rise, the reign, and the ruin of Sean Combs. And now, we must deliver the verdict. Not a legal verdict. The courts will handle that. But a human one. When we look at P. Diddy, it is easy to see a monster. It is easy to point at the screen, judge the violence, and distance ourselves. But that is too simple. Monsters are rare. Broken humans are everywhere. Sean Combs is a dark mirror. He reflects the obsession of our culture, the belief that enough power, enough money, and enough fame can heal a wounded child. He spent 50 years running from the ghost of his father. He ran so fast he conquered the world. He built an empire to prove he was worth something. But he forgot the most important rule of the race. Wherever you go, there you are. You cannot outrun your own shadow. You can dress it in white linen. You can bathe it in champagne. You can hide it behind a billion-dollar smile and a wall of NDAs. But eventually, the sun goes down, and in the dark, the shadow is all that is left. He wanted to be a king. He became one. But look at his kingdom now. It is a cautionary tale written in neon lights and court documents. He proves that you can gain the whole world and still lose your own soul. And that is a trade that no amount of Kirok can ever buy back. So, here is my advice to you. We live in a world that worships the hustle. We are told to grind, to dominate, to be the killer in the room. We celebrate the narcissist as a visionary and the psychopath as a CEO. Be careful what you wish for. Ambition is a beautiful fuel, but it is a terrible master. Do not envy the shiny suits. Do not envy the parties. Because you never know what kind of nightmare is happening behind the velvet rope. True power isn't about controlling others. True power is controlling yourself. If you have to destroy everyone around you to feel big, you are not a giant. You are just a child with a loaded gun. I want you to think back to the question we asked at the very beginning of this hour. What is the price of greatness? And is it worth it? Look at the lonely man in the empty mansion. Look at the legacy of ash. I want to know what you think. Is the crown worth the curse? Let me know in the comments below. We read every single one. If you want to understand more about the psychology of power and how it corrupts the most brilliant minds, click the video on your screen right now. We dive even deeper into the abyss of the human psyche. As for Sean Combs, he had a motto, a phrase he shouted on every track, in every interview, for 30 years. Can't stop, won't stop. For a long time, we thought that was a promise of victory. Now we know it was a diagnosis. He couldn't stop, and now he has been stopped. This has been your narrator. I'll see you in the dark.